All right, we're live, John. So thank you for coming back to the channel.
Thanks for having me.
Are you thirsty?
Well, I'm sipping on my coffee.
See,
I
today,
haven't had coffee yet today. It's a little late.
actually, I made tea. I made hot tea. So
Okay, well,
if you, here you
mazel tov. Click.
go. All right,
No,
so we're
I,
so
you know, I, I do straight black like my women.
you
Just
know,
kidding.
the thing is I drink a lot of coffee, a
Yeah,
lot of coffee, but if I drink, just straight black coffee throughout the day, my stomach is just hurting. I have to have some milk in it just to ease the acidity of the bean.
it's
But
interesting because I used to like to put milk and honey and things in it, but actually it bothered me more doing that. So I guess, I eat strawberries and grapes and bananas and stuff as my morning breakfast. So I seem to absorb acidic things well.
we are live for the ones that are listening. We are live on YouTube, and we also are simulcasting on X Spaces. So for the ones that want to ask questions throughout the show, please type them in the chat or join X Spaces. Raise your hand for the mic, and we will bring you online. So, John, as I set up the background stuff for our audience, take it away.
All right. Well, I had some people write me to want me to comment on certain things that are going on in the world, um, and also today it'd be interesting. I might throw a lot of ideas out fresh to all of you because today. I finally went through getting all my huge Hogue prophecy report out, and that was on the 15th. And I finally now have got it on. It's easier. The easiest place to read it is in my blue flagged X page, so you can see it there, and the free samples. And then I have the list of the two free samples, and then the rest of the 10 articles you can read if you subscribe to Hope Prophecy. And right now I'm doing something that's pretty rare, and I'm giving you the price of 2 years subscription for one price of $60 or a little more. So that means you have the advantage of not being nagged all the time because you're there for 24 months, and I just figured it's so important these next 24 months. Very history on the verge in many, many ways. Um, I'm already putting together what I'm going to do now with the Hogue Prophecy Report. It's going to be the Hogue Prophecy Quarterly Report. It's going to come out every 3 months. And that will help me because it's like a magazine. It's the long form. It's where you take a basic theme or themes and go deep into them. Although this one, I think, is going to be a potpourri of different themes that I haven't had time to talk about because of the things I'm usually talking about on it. So on October 1st, it's scheduled to come out to my subscribers, and the next one will come out the first quarter of next year, which is January 1st, and then April 1st, April Fool's Day. It'll be the April Fool's edition, and also July 1st and October 1st. So that's the new way I'm doing it because I'm trying to, I have two kinds of readers. One, half my readers love the long form. The other half want a lot more frequent and shorter articles to absorb. So what I'm going to do is I am going to do a single special report article once a month in those 3 months, just to keep the thread going. And it'll be something really critical and important that everybody needs to kind of anticipate. And I think the one that I think what's going to come in the new one is an examination of just how close are we seeing President Trump actually use tactical nuclear weapons on Iran. It's kind of being talked about. That's that doesn't mean it'll happen, but it's being talked about, even amongst the the Trumpanzees of his the Trumpanzees. I think that almost sounds like an animal band group, but I'm starting to think I'm going to start calling his cabinet the Trumpanzees because they seem to be monkeying around a lot. And and looking at the difficulty is certainly these articles, when they come once a month before the big one, will be articles that really look at a major trend or a major thing to look at that's happening. Um, the the You see, the problem is he's lost the war conventionally. He lost it badly. Uh, and now he's trying to find a way to win something, and he's not facing the fact, because he is kind of a descending into, I've always said he's been an 8-year-old all his life, but now he's a demented 8-year-old. So um, it it's just not working for him, and it's very likely he might want to do some big explosion, like drop a atomic some tactical nukes on Pickaxe Mountain, where he thinks under 3,000 feet of solid granite, there's where all the powder for Iran's nuclear weapons project is. Um, Actually, it's more than likely it's somewhere in a cave in Isfahan. But if he goes after that, he's hitting a major nearby, a very large population center. And but there's an interesting talk about it, that if you there's really a line crossed. If anybody uses tactical nuclear weapons, that basically means that everyone will be able to use them in any major war if they have them. And so it would be a major milestone if it's crossed. Hopefully, it will not be crossed. I expect this article to come out in early September. I'm still kind of watching what's going on. Um, the other article is well, the next Hogue Prophecy Quarterly report is I'm already putting it together. It'll be a lot smaller. These, every once in a while, when I need to, I have to send a $60,000 60,000 word uh, set of articles. This one was a big one, the one I just released. And if anybody wants to subscribe to Hogue Prophecy reports, you will get it for free, along with the subscription for anything else that's coming. So, and that was what we've been talking a lot about. In fact, a lot of people joined the report after listening to us last 2 weeks ago, having me read large segments from it. And so, thank you for coming. And so, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. You know
Okay.
what? I wanted to just add what has transpired in the last 2 weeks is the bond market.
Mm,
So
writing about that in the quarterly.
yeah, Bassett intervened in the belly of the curve, the 10-year, trying to bring it down. For that first day, it did work. It did bring the yield down a little bit. How he's doing it is he's financing it where he's buying bonds at the middle of the curve and selling at the front end of the curve. And so
It's
that's
another
going to
way of
raise the
calling
rate.
robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right. So, a lot of people on the surface are seeing this as, okay, there's intervention by the treasury market. They're really scared of the 10-year getting above 5%. And there's also a crowding out effect that's taking place with the AI companies coming in with their commercial debt. They're starting to finance some of these projects now with issuing debt, not equity, not these other convoluted circular financings. They're actually going to the market and saying, okay, we're going to issue debt now. And so you have investors out there that are going, okay, there's an IPO coming for Anthropic. We just invested a bunch of money in an IPO for SpaceX. These are trillions of dollars, worth of capex for these companies. So there seems to be a little bit of a crowding out effect that's taking place in the U.S. Treasuries. So if you're an investor, you're going to go for a higher yield, right? If you're going to buy debt, if you're a company that or an investment house or a trading floor that's buying debt, you would prefer to buy debt that's from Oracle or from Nvidia than the U.S. Treasury. So there seems to be a
Yeah.
crowding out effect. So Besson, I think, is very scared that once
Well,
it
he's also
passes.
very stupid. I mean, the way he sat there and went, I didn't understand. I didn't know that would happen. It's like, God,
Well, well, so they're very scared of it reaching escape velocity if it gets above 5% for the 10 year for yield, 5% yield.
Yeah, because then we get in this critical situation where, I mean, we just cleared $40 trillion
Right.
of public debt, and
Exactly.
we're probably 120 trillion in private debt, and that's only the little 340 million people in the United States.
Right. Right. So you have that other layer of debt to GDP ratio of 122%.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is a lot of push for the back of the curve to actually move much higher. 10, I would not be surprised if the 10-year goes to 5.2025 and the 30 goes closer to 6.
Yeah.
So this is going to affect mortgages. It will affect individuals that are on adjustable rates, credit cards, car payments. All these things are going to be affected. So there's going to be an erosion of people's disposable income on top of what's going on in the Middle East with oil being elevated and people are putting more. It's costing them more to fill up their gas tank and
And food, and the
and
food
food,
crisis
right?
is coming next year because we've got a third less food being made for 8 billion mouths to feed, and there will be food shortages and famines.
Right, exactly. So Basson is trying to do this engineering of the yield curve where, okay, bring down by buying in the belly of the curve and then issue new debt on the front of the curve, even though now the 2 year is about 4.1, 4.13, something around there. Now, when they do that, it's going to raise the rate on the front end of the curve because he's selling debt into the market.
Yeah.
So again, to use your term, stealing from Paul to
Robbing Peter
Peter,
to pay Paul.
right? Whatever. All right. So so you have that going on. Now the extra layer here is what Warsh is going to do from the Federal Reserve. Now these are two totally different departments, and they don't seem to be coordinated at all. So what what Besson is doing on the front end of the curve may get exacerbated if the Federal Reserve has to raise rates because of inflation. Now, inflation is above the 2% target. It's depending on what number you use, but it's looking like it's above 3.4, 3.7, 3.5, whatever. It moves around, but it's way above the 2% target. And if if we're going to have prudent monetary policy, Warsh is going to have to raise rates. But
Yeah.
when he does that, that whole yield curve is going to get worse.
Yeah.
So you have the crowding out effect, you have the inflation issue that seems to be taking hold, and midterm elections. You have, you have a changing climate, and the food
Yep.
yields are going to be a problem because of droughts in
Yes.
Arizona. You've heard in the news where they're actually cutting the actual water supply to Arizona because of Lake Mead.
Yeah, it's drying out. And we are, by the way, I'm going to, for all of you who've been waiting for me to put my climate prophecy stuff on the shelf for a while because of these immediate dangers of war. But from now on, I'm going to catch you all up on just how much climate change is accelerating very fast, like the bond market in
Mhm.
degrees. And the European super highs that have cut this big El Nino that's happening. It's going to be, these are also pressuring the political world as well as the economic world, on top of the fact that we have this war going on that Trump lost, but he can't. He's too much of a little 2-year-old child to actually admit that he lost this war, and he might just drop a tactical nuke to put off a show and say, "Okay, we're done. We're declare victory and go home." But if he does that, he's literally changed the gestalt. He's changed the way people think about nukes from 1945 to this year. It has been verboten. It has been just something we've all followed, despite any crisis, that no one ever uses a nuke in a real war. No
Mhm.
one. And this would be unilateral. This wouldn't be in defense. This would be Donald Trump striking Iran unilaterally,
Mhm.
which is, that means any idiot with atomic bombs can do that if they have tactical bombs.
To
So,
prove your point, there's analogs within his administration this time, Trump 2.0, where he's changed the zeitgeist. He's changed the zeitgeist in terms of global economy and how we approach tariffs.
yeah.
He's changed freedom of navigation
Yeah, he's gone
in
pirate.
right.
He's not. He doesn't even ask the Congress. He's acting like an emperor and a king. He has become the Roman emperor that I hoped he never would become.
Yeah. So there's a documentary. I just saw it recently. It's I think it's called I think it's from Uncut. I think the group that does it or the production company is called Uncut. But it's talking about Trump. It's his first term
Yeah,
and him being a sociopath. And they were warning everyone that there was a problem with Trump. There's he has decision making uh, uh, um, issues, and it can get the country into some dangerous situations.
but the thing where they are, which I anticipated before them by years, is the danger of Trump having a second term delayed because of his family history for front lobal dementia and other things. And he's, it sounds like he's acting just like his father. He's yelling and screaming at everybody, just like his father in his final years did. So people are kind of, uh, afraid to even give him bad news. In fact, they don't give him bad news because he just freaks out for hours and empties his britches and sometimes and causes more than just a verbal stink.
Neil Ferguson, the historian, has mentioned multiple times that he thinks that Trump's administration is very similar to Nixon. That he has
No,
there's a
that
Nixon
I categorically
really.
disagree
Well,
with
let,
that.
let me let me just
But
finish
go ahead so I
just
can,
finish
yeah,
it. Finish it. So he has used the term on different
it's much
podcasts.
worse.
Well, maybe has used the term Nixon's revenge,
But
and
Nixon
that
had a brain.
well that well yeah
Nixon wasn't going into dementia.
yeah I well I'm not
Go
getting
ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but the point that Neil Ferguson is making is that what something within his administration could take him down and not allow him to actually finish his full term here.
He must be
And
the
I'm
last man on the
wondering,
planet as a forecaster who figured that one out. I'm not a
I'm
big
wondering,
fan of Mr.
I'm
of him,
wondering,
Neil.
I'm wondering
An idiot.
if it's dealing with this harp. This isn't her last name Harp? I think it's her name, Natalie.
Oh, the woman, yes. Well, she's a very
What?
dedicated secretary.
Well,
Before she was famous, I watched her live while he was listening to the Democratic speech,
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting. They work as an incredible team because she was back there. She's the one that types in all his stuff in his Truth Social. So she's there all hours. And it was interesting to watch Trump because he'd look and he'd go to the side and say, he'd say a certain thing like that, and she'd type it in. And that was when his mind was still working because, this was before the election, actually. And so I can understand why. She's kind of insinuated herself so close to him that they even got in the same food van to get to a plane and leave everybody else, the cabinet and everybody else, to face an assassination attempt. So said Netanyahu and the Mossad, which usually is wrong, and it was wrong. So that upset a lot of people. Um, I think it's one of the reasons why the press secretary quit because it was like, here I am with two children. He goes off with this blonde, leaves me behind as his press secretary and all the rest of us. And I think she had a feeling of mortality about it. So I think that had some, maybe not. I apologize if that's not her motivation, but it doesn't surprise me that she said it's time for me to spend more time with my children, my child, and be a mother because maybe she had to sit there and say, "My God, the president got off the plane, and we were the decoys.
Hmm.
Well, who's going
I'm
to be
wondering
my
if,
mother? Who's going to be a mother to my child?"
do you think that was a real threat event, or do you think it was
No,
a dry run?
no. I mean, no. I mean, it's 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 he will just believe anything Netanyahu tells him. And it's Mossad. Oh, Mossad's doo-doo doesn't stink. Of course, it stinks immensely. As I've said many times, Mossad knows how to gather intelligence, but they're one of the worst uh, users of that gathering to do things right. I mean, the ones that said, "Oh, don't worry, the people are going to rise up and overthrow the Ayatollah. It'll be all done in a few days." And that didn't happen. And if anything, and he was so shocked. I even quoted some of the stuff where he's watching the million, 40 million people in the funerary celebrations across Iran, and another 10 million in Iraq, where the most countries that have the most largest Shia populations. And and he was like, "Wow, I thought they hated him." And that's that's all Mossad. I mean, he listens to Mossad and people who are sympathetic in Mossad and Christian nationalists that are in the CIA and other places who are politically speaking is just as volatilely dangerous as Mossad. And then on top of that, as I was talking about 2 weeks ago, we have this bill where Netanyahu wants to insinuate Israel, Mossad, and their military fuse as one with our military. We don't even do that with NATO or any of our allies. This would be unprecedented. It would mean that the Israelis don't have to steal intelligence from the United States anymore. They literally can grab it. It's theirs for them to use, including ways to silence people who are critical to Israel. So free speech will be out the window. It literally will be a soft coup d'etat taking over the United States government from its highest levels, from all the people bought in the Congress and all the people, and including Trump, who's the biggest bought man that Israel has ever bought because of the Epstein situations. And so, but to get back to Neil Ferguson, uh, uh, I find him. I stopped even commenting about him anymore about 10 years ago because he just consistently kind of pulls the wrong rat out of the bag. The premise is to compare it to Nixon. Um, I mean, Nixon had his mind. Nixon could be paranoid, but he his problem was that he got to it was a strange thing that Nixon did. If fundamentally, it was the Pentagon Papers that got him going about, well, we don't want any leaks in my administration, but it was like this is where he even admitted it to show that he was lucid to the end. He said, I made a mistake. It was like it wasn't even about me. It was about Lyndon Baines Johnson. But he got that little paranoid side of him in there that he said, "Well, we better protect ourselves from so no, there's no leaks about anything. I got to tape everybody and all that because that was Nixon's problem. He was a bit of paranoid, um, but that doesn't mean he couldn't be a good leader. I mean, Stalin was very paranoid, and he ended up running the Soviet Union until he died. And as grim as he could be, to really understand Stalin, you kind of got to take your white hats and your black hats off and look at some of the things Stalin did that if he hadn't done them ruthlessly, made them so, Soviet Union would be destroyed by Adolf Hitler and he would have won World War II. Hitler. He realized in the 20s that the Soviet peoples had to, in a decade, do what all the other superpowers in Europe, military and industrial powers, did in a century. They were going to have to, in 10 years, catch up and turn the Soviet Union into an industrial supergiant. And of course, Stalin may not have been much into democracy, but he did understand the power, the advantages that can be given a leader who's an autocrat. You get things done. You may get things done and kill 1 million people doing it of your own people, but you will get to that goal of being a major industrial base. And if that had not happened, Hitler would have invaded with 3 million men across into the Soviet Union as an agrarian state. And imagine, you think the evil of Stalin was bad. Hitler's own secret conversations were constantly talking about how he would depopulate the European Russia and repopulate it with Germans and cull 40 million Soviet citizens in the death camps. So, it would have been, he was just beginning with his genocidal ideas. He was going to take out the Jews because they were the smallest group, but he was literally going to depopulate the Soviet Union. And then the ones that were left would only be trained enough the kind of grunt labor would only be trained enough to be able to read the signs so they could go to the factories and the agricultural areas where they would be slaves. I mean, so sometimes history is very strange. And you will have a man who did evil, as Stalin did, but also a man that um, equally saved the Soviet Union by forcing his people to build and in a race for their own survival. And in that he succeeded. So, sometimes history is not it's not about who's good and who's bad. It's a little more twisted and mixed up. So anyway, I think there's no comparison between any administration and what the second term of Trump is doing. Um, Although it was coming, the warning was already with Joe Biden. And I got to say, in astrology, again, it's quite a thing that I have not seen in any of the history of our presidents, that once we cleared the year 2000 in that election, every president we've had has been severely astrologically afflicted. Most of them, the two-term Bush, the two-term Obama, and the spread two-term Trump, and only Biden didn't have this aspect, which is the sun squared Neptune in his birth chart. The others did. Trump didn't have it in his birth chart, but he has the sun squared Neptune in the US chart. So it's the curse of this. For laymen, it means your gut always tells you the wrong thing. That you think your gut is telling you what's right and what's true. It's always wrong, and you can't even imagine it is. And you can only deny that it isn't when everything blows up in your face. Now, I've had in some of my private readings with people, some rare people who have had this Neptune square the sun in their charts, and they had a rough time. This one person, who I will not name, he hit my client. He had a lot of hard knocks because his gut decision making put him in terrible situations, but he somehow managed to get out of it. And what he eventually learned is, and this can happen with somebody with such a square, is you really find your real gut, because the false gut of your ego astrology is so terrible that you have a context. And he found it. Most people don't. Most people end up having tragic lives with this and problems. And it's always about decision making. And when decision making is what you do as president of the United States, if listening to your cabinet ministers whom you picked, and you as the executive must have the talent to pick people that will tell you what's really going on rather than kiss your big butt. And um, it's, I mean, Ronald Reagan was a massive. If you look at Ronald Reagan's astrology, I mean, I'm no pro-Reagan guy. He's the president that destroyed my commune in Oregon and against the law and all that. But I'm fair with the man for what he did, things that he was good at. And he was very good. He was a natural born Aquarian um, uh, administrator. And the talent of the executive is a very subtle and rare talent. It's if you're really doing it right, you don't have to do a lot because you've got a team that you found a way to build a team of people. And his cabinet was one of the best cabinets, especially the first term, one of the best cabinets any American president ever had. Or it's like Lincoln, he also had a great executive branch understanding. In fact, the movie Lincoln, Spielberg's Lincoln, I've been watching it a lot, and it really does a great job of capturing. And what he did, what was genius of Lincoln, is he actually picked all the people who tried their damnedest to defeat him in the primaries in the new Republican Party. And he surprised them all. Seward, Stanton, all these amazing people he picked because he said, well, I think it should be a cabinet of rivals. So he actually was saying, yeah, I want you to dispute. I want you to discuss. I don't want you to be all, oh, we love you, Donald. It was a contentious, but it was an amazing thing that it did is it won them over. Because no president did that to the extent that Lincoln did. And it kind of made them more sober in that he would, yeah, this is the guy that I call a baboon and all this. And he's actually made me Secretary of State or something like that. It's like, because he says, I need people like you, people to debate with me, people who will disagree. It will help me make my decisions more complete when I know this. Now, Trump is the exact he's the opposite. He is the very few people he had, like Tulsi Gabbard and her assistant and a few other people, and the vice president that he cannot fire. He's tried. He's asked a few times, can I fire this guy? You know, and of course he can't in the Constitution. And frankly, it's one of the few constitutional rules he had to surrender to and accept. He's just about blown out the window all the other things that he legally can do. I mean, he's a pirate. The world is going through a phase right now where people are just pirating whatever they want. People are just seizing ships because they think, oh, these are some kind of shadow fleet of the Russians. And they're just going literally on the high seas, disrupting shipping. And we've got equally a U.S. Navy that is now completely showing it's a white elephant. I mean, to get back to the question I was going to answer from one of the readers, was saying, what's going to happen with Taiwan? is there going to be a war with Taiwan? And so now, thanks to that person, um, I'm going to give my answer. Uh, I've always said, even before this really got hot in 2022, I was already writing that there would be there'd be a conventional Third World War in its conventional phase, which we've been in since 2022, since February 24th, when the Russians, I contend, were provoked to invade and protect the Donbass states of Donetsk and Lugansk because NATO had built a 350,000 man army, a de facto NATO force trained for 8 years with the goal to ethnically push out all the Russians in that main industrial zone. It's kind of the main industrial zone of Ukraine. And basically, a second time, the people who were the breakaway republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, who had been fighting an 8 year civil war, who had been for 8 years daily and nightly hit by bombs and missiles. Um, you know, my heart bleeds for the Ukrainians in Kiev and the bombing that's happening. And I even have contacts that are my sources for what's going on the streets of Kiev and other cities in Ukraine. And I can't even, I wish I could have this talk with them, but I know that they're so kind of narrow-minded on what's really going on outside. And there's so much denial in Ukraine. Everybody's trying so hard to pretend that there isn't a Nazi regime, right? And that everything's fine. And oh, there's Ivan, our neighbor. Look, he's down on the street, and this car just with a bunch of camouflage goons just beat him to a pulp and dragged him away. Oh, that's probably something we shouldn't worry about, But there's now across Ukraine there are thousands of men being beaten, and their families are trying to hold on to them and keep them. These goons come in, and they literally, rather than draft the people, they Shanghai them. They beat them up. They end up being put into a military training. They're given at most 3 weeks, which is not enough. 3 months is the minimum to be somewhat proficient as an infantryman, but even that's not enough. Should be 6 to 9, but they don't have any men left. They've killed 1 million Ukrainians, and another million are crippled who can't go back to fight. 2 million, and then I mean the country is literally having a demographic collapse. Um, and so they are, but there's this. It must have been like this in Nazi Germany. In Nazi Germany, there were the good Germans. I think Ukrainians are struggling as a majority with this feeling of the good Ukrainians. And they just, oh, where's the Jewish family that lived next door? I heard all this noise. Oh, don't worry about it. It's we shouldn't don't ask questions about it. There's a way that people cope when they're in a totalitarian regime, especially if it's a fascist regime. And Ukraine is a fascist state since 2014, when in the United States Maidan coup happened, where a lot of people were shot in the Maidan Square, and basically the Americans helped rig it by getting right sector to do all this mayhem, which forced Yanukovych, who was the last really democratically elected president of Ukraine, out, and put the who's who of Svoboda Party and right sector and other people in power, with swastika flags flying, because Ukraine had the largest contingents in the German SS in the Second World War. Whole divisions of Ukrainians signed up to do Adolf's work, dirty work in Ukraine. And so it's the biggest open secret that everybody, including most of the mainstream press, just doesn't want to deal with. But it's going down all too predictably, like a fascist regime goes down, like the Italian fascist regime, like the Japanese fascist regime, and the German fascist regime in World War II. Um, they 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 end up being utterly destroyed because they're anti-life. Uh, and their whole idea of conquest is to say, I mean, the Japanese believe, especially back then in the time of Hirohito and the Imperial Japanese Empire, that they are not even normal human beings, that they are the sons and daughters of the sun goddess Amaterasu. This was really the belief that we're born from the sky, from some, we're superior beings. And of course, the Aryans thought they were the master race. And of course, the Mussolini's fascists thought, because fascia from fascis is a symbol of the Roman imperial power, they wanted to be the new Roman power, usurping over lesser people. Um, and now we have some of their descendants in Ukraine who also believe that they are pure blood from the West, Ukrainians that are not tainted with any Russian blood, like the central Ukrainians, and especially the ne'er-do-wells that are completely subhuman to us. The third rate, third class Russian-speaking Ukrainians, which are 40% of the population. And in that 40% is most of the industry. Well, now soon that's all going to be a part of Russia because they broke away. That when they were given a chance to do referendums, four of those states joined Crimea, which did it right after the Maidan happened in 2014. Another four, Zaporozhye, Lugansk, Kherson, and Donetsk, are now part of the Russian Federation because they want to be, because they've been treated well. If half the country, if the West United States just declared the industrial and heavily populated East part of the United States as you are third class United States Americans. And you can't speak in your dialects. You can't speak this way. You have to talk like us in the West. Otherwise, you will be banned from school. You can't go to education. This is what was going on in Ukraine. And the main problem that makes Ukraine such an impossibility, I mean, I'll just say it again. Where are you from? Ukrainian says, I'm from Ukraine. And what does that mean? Uh, well, it means I'm from the hinterland. I'm from the borderland. The borderland of what? Because that means you're not a country, you're a territory, a territorial borderline of what? The Ruski Mir. You are Russians. You are just Russians that are, rather than have an idea that you have a different racial mix, because your genetics don't, if you take your blood tests, you're all actually as much Slavic as the Russians, and you have as much Mongol blood in you as a lot of the SS people, and they say, oh well, the Russians have Genghis Khan intermarried with all them and turned them into Orientals. And, and I said, well, no, if you look at the genetic tests, just like if Hitler had genetic tests, you'd find out that they had all kinds of blood running through them. And it was not, nobody's pure, very rarely. If you're going to play that silly game uh, of ethno supremacy, which the Ukrainians in the West are doing. Um, well,
Well, it would have been interesting to see how the Nazi Party would have spun the data coming from 23andMe, when they did their genetic tests.
it almost like it'd be fun. It'd be a fun story, a science fiction story. Somehow they went back in time to Hitler and when they were doing the Lebensborn, and they were literally, their whole genetic idea was just what the surface, what you look like. If you had blue eyes and blonde hair, well, you must be an Aryan. Well, it's so dumb because who are the purest Aryans on the planet? And it's even in the name as an abbreviation of the full phrase. It's the name of Iran. Iranians are the true pure-blooded Aryans. Iran means land of the Aryans. And so,
I don't know.
but if you go up into all those blonde people up in the bushes wearing wolf skins, you know, there are all kinds of different people. A lot of it's Nordic Viking. I mean, I'm a whole my whole genetics is I'm supposed to be Scandinavian primarily, but it's a Scandinavian Viking that bred with Russians, Ukrainians, Jews, everybody, and French Normans and Franks, you know, and British, Yorkshire, Northern English people, and I have a little bit of Irish, Northern Irish too. And, it's a real mix. So, I mean, I think if the Vikings went into a time machine into the present, I don't think they would associate it all with modern day Scandinavians, because Scandinavians, when they stopped being Vikings and going everywhere and not just trading with people, but melding with other peoples, the Vikings were not ethnocentric at all. They dug everybody, so they now what's happened is the gene pool in Norway and Sweden and Denmark has pretty much populated with itself and has become this kind of peaceful and a Nordic person that a Viking would not even understand. You call yourself Nordic, so but they're actually technically the most pure-blooded Nordic people there are. The Vikings were always messing around with everybody. So, um, so anyway, I've gone on one of those
So
bouncing from one stream of consciousness thing, and we've got somebody who's
yeah, we
ready.
do have a question here, and it is dealing with astrology. This is from Holly the cat.
Hello, Polly the cat.
No, Holly. Holly.
Oh, Holly the cat.
All right. So, is there significance with two eclipses this month, and the next two are in Egypt next year and in New Zealand in 28? So,
Well,
for these eclipses, should we be?
Well, it is important to follow major eclipses, and we had one, I think it was last month, where it did a very strange thing. It was an eclipse that hit across Europe and all the way down to Spain. In fact, I watched this wonderful show. It's a great way to decompress, is watch the story arc of these two Yorkshire Northern English couple and their two kids, and she used to be a model and he was an engineer, and they are starting a young family up in these beautiful mountains near Valencia, Spain. And it's called Lady and the Owl Man. Uh, and I highly recommend you all watch it, because they're wonderful people, and it's just wonderful. But anyway, they watched the eclipse from their mountain, so I got to see it. I was wondering if they were going to watch it. I'm sure a lot of their fans said, "Hey, can you see it from where you're going to do?" Because Valencia is within the shadow, and so which is a little north of them, about 30, 40 miles. But so they had the little horns of the sun, very rare, and kind of as far as eclipses are as divinatorial messages, the horned moon setting is definitely like the ring of the there's also when sometimes the eclipse is like a blazing ring, like the ring of the Nibelung or something, or the ring of power in the sky, because the moon is actually a smaller than usual, because it's farther away in such a way that when it nestles into the sun, there's a point where the whole sun is a ring around it. Uh, um, I can't think of the term for that at the moment. It escapes me. But anyway, so this was like sunset. This thing happened, and tens of millions of people saw it all across Europe. So yeah, that was a significant eclipse. And when you think, I'll have to look at the other ones happening next year. Uh, I mean, they make significant hits. For instance, I wrote a book about it. In we had a situation in the 20 teens in the United States and into the early 2024. So 2017 in August, and then in March of 2024, I believe, what we had was unique across the lower 48 states of the United States. We had a shadow coming in from the Pacific Northwest that went out in South Carolina in August of 2017. And then not long after that, we had another hurricane, another eclipse. They can be like that, hurricanes in history. But so we had, so one was going down, if let's see, from your point of view, I probably should do it this way, although it could be backwards the way things are in these. But anyway, if you think of the Pacific Northwest, let's see, I'll just do something here. I'm going to draw it. Yeah. If you look at there we go. And then there's that part, and then yeah. So in 2017, so here's the United States. Uh, in 2017, August, the sun did this. And the part of the greatest darkness was right over the New Madrid fault line in Missouri, right there. And so I wrote a whole book about it, talking about this weird thing that happened because I tracked, I had been tracking how there's this one famous eclipse that actually is described in Nostradamus's prophecies, and he actually describes where it comes through, and the date he dates it around the end, near the end of the millennium, of the next millennium. That would have been 1999, 2000. And he described the shadow passing over the Flanders Field in Belgium, which it did after going across England. So he had some hint of the shading and dated it. And so what then happened was that wherever the shadow touched, out to maybe up to 20 degrees out from the complete eclipse, all these earthquakes happened in the next 3 months and then onward to the next 4 years, all along the line of that eclipse. This happened again in the other great eclipse of 2009. And then a similar thing happened more in Asia and India. The Kutch earthquake in it all happened, was over the shadow, and then it was hit by natural disasters, including one of the areas that was influenced was the Tohoku quake on the 11th of March, 2011, which was the one that caused all the tsunamis that actually, yeah. So I thought, okay, well, then maybe this would happen with the one in 2017. And given that the darkest point was at a place which is the place that's least prepared for earthquakes, Missouri, mid-Mississippi states, are Memphis, all those areas are not in any serious earthquake code because they very rarely get earthquakes, except back in 1812. At the end of 1812, there were two massive quakes. They were not the same quake or an aftershock. These two massive quakes, I think they were around 8-point quakes, and they were so big that church bell towers, the bells were ringing in Boston, like 1,000, 1,500 miles away. And what was a little camp that would later become St. Louis, all the structures were taken down, and these were just cabins. And for a time, the Mississippi River changed its course and started flowing north rather than south. And then it kind of came back. So if that had happened when Memphis had 1.2 million people in its metropolitan area, and when St. Louis had 4.5 million people in its metropolitan area, and all the bridges that cross that area would literally split the country transportation-wise in half. and it would be a major natural disaster. And so I looked at all that, and the good news is that it didn't happen. What happened was something I theorized in the book. I said, well, there was another eclipse very similar to this one that happened in 1918, right when the United States was showing itself in World War I as the world power that would, and long story short, the American century began when the doughboys were over there and Americans gave just enough power to the Allies to defeat Imperial Germany in World War I and World War One. So it was the beginning of America coming out of its isolation and becoming a great influence in the world as a world power. So for me, that was the onset of the beginning of the American century, which 99 years later, I predicted that this eclipse that went this way was the beginning of a transitional period, which will see another eclipse come out of New Mexico and crossbar the United States. Here's the one coming out through New Mexico and around the same area, just a little of several miles difference was the center again. And literally the two shadows crossbarred the United States. X out the American century. So I said in that book, the Great Eclipse, Earthquake and Tsunami, which you can get on Amazon. It's available as a physical book as well as an ebook. So check it out. And just type in John Hogue, Hogue, and then look for it. It's called The Great Eclipse. It has an eclipse and it's all in shades of gray. Um, it I said in that book that this was the first phase of an eclipse event that was marking the end of the American century. And it's interesting because it's just 1 year short of 100 years. But what then happened was the 2024 eclipse did the other crisscrossing over the same dark point and went out through the Great Lakes and New Brunswick. And so what I'm seeing now is it is not, for instance, this will happen where we have the curse of Tecumseh, which is where every 20 years, when Jupiter and Saturn are conjoined, which happens every 20 years, it happens in a year that ends in a zero. And most of the time, we elect our presidents and when this curse was enacted in 1840, like clockwork. It was Tecumseh was the great Iroquois leader of the Great Lakes Indian nations that were trying to stop the future president Harry Harrison from becoming president of the United. Oh, well, he became president of the United States, but basically he defeated him, and his younger brother was a very powerful medicine man. And when he heard that this had happened, he said, "I tell you that Harrison will die. He will die." He put a curse on him, and he said, "And every white chief in every generational change, which is 20 years, will then die in office of the white tribe." Well, here's the chilling thing that happened. Literally chilling, because Harrison, to be seen in a driving rainstorm in February in the inauguration day, which was usually later in the year because everybody had to get to Washington and horse and carriage. He made sure that he took his top hat off so that everybody could see his huge shock of white hair and see him when he's speaking. Because they had no microphones then. And it was very cold winter rain, and he caught cold and he caught pneumonia and he died about a month later. So he was the first victim, the very initiator of the murdering of this medicine man's older brother, who was the commander of the Indians, of the natives. And so what then happened is every 20 years pass, Abraham Lincoln is elected in 1860. Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Now, in between that, Zachary Taylor was also elected, but he was not part of the curse, even though he died in office from eating bad strawberries and cream in a hot day, overate. But so there's always an anomaly, just like we were saying earlier that there's some anomalies I talked about in the shofar being blown, the March of Return and the first Intifada were not done during the silence of the shofars not being blown. So there are anomalies that come up, but all the rest of the stuff happened. That Zionism is infamous for doing since 1948. Now, the so Harrison, 1840, 20 years later, Lincoln, he actually survives his first term, gets into his second term, and is assassinated. 20 years later, and Garfield in 1880 is elected president. He is killed, an assassination by an anarchist. 20 years later, it'll be McKinley, elected in 1900. He is also murdered by an anarchist at a World's Fair. 20 years later, Harding. Harding had literally Harding of the arteries. He died of a heart attack in his first term. 20 years later after that, well, it gets kind of interesting because that is 1940, the election of 1940, when Jupiter and Saturn conjoined. And by the way, it's an important thing to understand that with the ancients who were understanding of the cosmos, much more than modern people, ancient peoples would never elect a new leader or choose a new leader during a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction because that's almost like a astrological Yom Kippur. It's a conjunction that lasts the whole year, which is a time for atoning and fasting and reflecting, and in preparing after that to choose leaders. But in our unconsciousness, it's just like there's so many very powerful places here in the Pacific Northwest that the natives, I've even had them ask me, why are people populating Enumclaw, this valley? And like all these white people just seem to go, or Snoqualmie, the Valley of the Moon. This is a place for meditation, sacred acts, but there's like people just living there. There's a very powerful energy up there that's driving a lot of people to drink and do crazy stuff, and all the white people. And the Indians say, "Well, yeah, this is a powerful medicine spot. This is not a place for people to live. This is a place for people to come and meditate, and then come back." And so those kind of things are lost to modern people. I mean, I in the study of this climate change that's enveloping, one of the best sources that I've had are literally people in Alaska, native peoples in the United States and Canada, that they remember the weather reports for thousands of years. It's a whole verbal thing that's shared, and because they're so close to nature, they're definitely seeing what's coming long before anybody, even the scientists, started to consider is happening to the climate and how we're changing it very rapidly now. I mean, I'll just say this one aside prophecy. I say by the 2040s, there will be no disbelievers in climate change unless they're complete retards. There's not going anybody who has a brain is going to understand. And frankly, I wish you were all right, the deniers. I'm on your side, but I've been dealing with this since 1973, studying it. And unfortunately, as much as I want to be a believer like the other deniers, I can't be. It's upon us. And now it's really speeding up. This in the last from 2020 to 2026, we have had the three worst arable crop harvests around the world in our history. Three. That means that every other year of the 6 years that have come from this new decade, half of them have been disastrous crop yield years. That is a speed up pattern. The thing about global warming, it's all about the aggregate. Everybody thinks, oh, well, we had a cold winter, this and then we had this and that. But you've got to look at the aggregate. The hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. Hot, cold. Do you see it's going up? It has not had a dip. I wish it did. I'd love to see that because that would then put some arguments in favor of the deniers, which I'd really like to be able to report because I don't want this happening because short of AI going crazy and Third World War, this global warming is a potentially extinction level event for our civilization and human species.
Well, let me just interject.
Yeah.
Do you feel philosophically that mankind deserves to have such a high population? And that maybe this is just a natural feedback loop to just knock the population down, have low crop yield. Because we have a population today because of hydrocarbons. We have
Yep.
fertilizer, we have all these machines, we can make lots of food, but now because of climate change and the crop yields are going down and we're having instability geopolitically where fertilizer isn't being shipped to regions that need it, that maybe this is a natural way for population reduction. There's this feedback, and that we've been living in a Goldilocks time period where maybe the population needs to go down below a billion people.
Well, I call it the bark beetle syndrome. I've about 20 years now, I've been calling it the bark beetles syndrome. And sometimes I'd say it like on Coast to Coast, this people called up and said, "How dare you call me a bark beetle? Having the intelligence of a bark beetle." And then I said to him in a little debate on the phone, this is back in the 90s, and I said, I'm sorry you're feeling upset, but um, I mean, don't we aren't we trained? We've got these big brains and this potential for a lot of intelligence and love and stuff that we could do, but we presume an intelligence that we haven't even tapped a tenth of its potential yet. Um, and we tend to act like machines, just like a little bug called the bark beetle. Now, the bark beetle, he um, he believes in infinite growth of his species by boring into trees, pine trees in the Midwest and in the Rockies and all, and literally killing off whole entire forests. But the bark beetle doesn't worry about it because basically how nature took care of the bark beetle before things got too dry, and then we're able then to advance into higher altitude forests because of global warming. This is the law of happenstance, I call it. Such is the case that, the term "out of chaos, dancing stars are born" that Nietzsche said. Um, Order is born out of chaos. But it's all very accidental initially. I mean, it's like, the sun just kind of lights up and then the dust, because now it has a gravity well around it, now the dust starts to move around. Now the dust, for some reason, just starts to get attracted to each other, and it builds these whole big terrestrial planets or gas ball planets with a maybe rocky core in the outer colder part of the universe. And then you might get lucky like we did and something the size of Mars, some fireball got into our orbit and collided with the Earth and made us a binary planet. We have a moon that's much larger than our own volume as a terrestrial planet. It's called a binary system. And it's given us a lot in the Goldilocks zone. It's given us a lot better chances to evolve species and more complex life forms, including potential sentient being that could be Christ conscious or Buddha conscious or Yahweh conscious. Um, and so it's that was just a happening. That was just chaos bouncing off of each other, and chaos creates order that way. So here's the bark beetle. He doesn't even think about anything but eating wood to make larval babies. And then it takes care of itself because when he is in the olden days, when it was a colder world, if he killed off a part of a forest, eventually the summer would come with the thunderstorms. Lightning would strike all the dry trees, and Mr. and Mrs. Bark Beetle and all their billions of little family got burnt up with the forest going down. And that's how a happenstantical thing eradicated bark beetles. But I would just say that our consuming is exactly like the bark beetle. This idea of unlimited growth that humans, I don't think they even intellectually deal with it. They're following their instincts as a bark beetle at one point. Just go. We never think about it. We just think we just got to keep growing, growing. Things got to get better and better. But it's impossible. If we will overpopulate the planet, and something like a lightning, like a climate change that we create is the lightning. We are literally at the rate that we're going now. Um, and unfortunately, this is one of my oldest prophecies that unfortunately is coming true. I wrote it in India in 1990. I started writing about the fact that and it was intuition. I couldn't back it scientifically, but back then everybody was saying, oh, we won't really see 2 degrees Celsius until maybe 2080 or 2090, just before the 22nd century. And that was the sanctified scientific conclusion. And for decades, I tried to find out this is not going to happen. It's coming in the 2020s and 2030s. It'll be on us in a way by the 2040s that nobody's going to deny it. Everybody's head's going to be pulled out of the sand. And when that happens, it's because a lot of dying off is going to happen, a lot of famines, a lot of wars. Even the Pentagon has, since the 1990s, have had secret, it got out, they got released, but they have been preparing for a future that's based on climate-oriented wars, a future where 108 countries already, back then, were having water disputes. And the kind, like, to give you an example, when the Ethiopians wanted to dam, I think it was the White Nile or the Blue Nile, I don't know which one, but it comes to a confluence in Chad, or not Chad, I mean, well, in the country that's south of Egypt, where I can't think of it at the moment, um, and Sudan. And so the Egyptians were saying, even a former head of the UN, who was a president of Egypt, saying, if you finish that dam, we'll bomb it and destroy it, because you will then be controlling this one little sliver of water has we Egyptians populating 1 million new babies every year for decades. That's all the water we have. And if you start needing it because of your overpopulation, then can you see what happens here? People fight over things that really matter. I mean, I've often felt, and it's just an intuition of mine, but I looked at the maps where the Amalekites had their tribe, and it's exactly over the road that Moses and the freed slaves, the Hebrew slaves, were coming out of Egypt. So it's on the Sinai on the waterfront, and that's where they came through. And sometime the Moses came through, and of course the story is that the Moses and his band of people, that the rear guard was attacked by the Amalekites. They ambushed it. Of course, that's a little weird, Prophet Samuel, for saying that in the first book of Samuel, because usually if a rear guard's attacked, that was not attacked at all when you were trampling all the grass and eating all the grass, that huge multitude of freed Hebrews just ate all the grass that keeps the livestock of the Amalekites alive. And if their livestock start dying, the Amalekites start dying. This is basic tribal 101. And so no wonder the Amalekites were angry. Their whole future was threatened, but they're obviously a small tribe compared to the Hebrews, and they could only kind of hit the rear guard, but not destroy it. but as even in the Bible, I contend, even the victors write the sacred scriptures, not the vanquished. But that is my theory that they were defending their lands, and Samuel got this message from God that now you've got to commit genocide in the first book of Samuel openly, wipe out all these people. And even to this day, in the most recent genocide that has been launched in our times, the Palestinian genocide, the Palestinian Holocaust, on the very day that it happened, you had Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the Secretary of Defense, and Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, raving about they are Amalek, which is code word for that every Jewish person understands or Israeli understands is code name for genocide. We wanted to the Amalekites what God himself through Samuel told us to do to the Amalekites. Kill all men, then slaughter all the childless women and the old women and the old men, and then march up, soldiers of Zion march up and grab the baby, suckling babies from the breasts of Amalekite mothers and watch and let them watch their babies having their throats slits and then their necks. This monstrous stuff is celebrated in the book of Samuel. Um, and I mean, if I would say if you worship Samuel as a prophet rather than the Adolf Hitler of his time, this is where, I have contentions with scriptures of many religions, not just my own part blood of Jewish religion. And I just got to say, hey, Hitler did this, and it was bad. Doing this to the Amalekites. And Yoav Gallant was after Netanyahu, he'd used the warning of think Amalek against Iranians 10 years earlier. So he also sees them as a race to be completely wiped out like the Amalekites. And and so anyway, Yoav Gallant got up and said, these people are animals. We are going to deny them power. We're going to deny them food. We're going to deny them water. Put it in so many words, I am openly declaring a genocide and I'm a war criminal. He didn't say that, but that's what that all meant. And they've been doing it since. I think at least 1 million Palestinians are dead now. I keep saying these numbers, and eventually my numbers, as they get worse, are caught up with the times. And yeah, I mean, I'll just finish with this tangent that um, even people that are against the genocide, even great journalists like Max Blumenthal, and from Max Blumenthal, who has a mind, a very brilliant mind, to the poor president who's losing his mind, they both share something in common. And I like, if I could talk to Max, I'd like to find out why he says what he says, because we all started before October 7th. We all started knowing that the estimated population from population counts of Gaza Strip were 2.3 million Palestinians. Now everybody's saying 1.8 or 1.9. I mean, Trump's saying it, Max is saying it. That's like 1.4 million or people are missing. Where do they go? They must, this whole story I hear the Zionists saying all the time. Oh, well, they bought their way out and they got through Egypt and, all the rich ones left. What, are you saying there's 1.4 million rich Palestinians that could afford those kind of money? And if there's that many people that got out, where are they? That's a lot of people. I mean, 3 million Jews got out of Europe that
Well,
survived out of the 9 million that were in there. And we clearly saw where they all went. A lot of them went to America. A lot of them went to different places. A lot of them left Europe and went and established the Jewish state in Israel. So we know where the survivors of Hitler's Holocaust went. Where's the survivor of your Holocaust, Yov and Netanyahu? They're not there. Well, I know where they are. They're either 6 feet under in Gaza or they're buried under dozens of feet of masonry from all the U.S. bombs and
I mean, there could be two. It could be either the killing total is much higher than what was originally stated, or the census of the population was faulty, or a little bit of both.
yeah, I thought of that too, but it looked like the census in I studied that. The census looked like it was pretty well done. It didn't look like it was a random ballpark number. And the other thing too is there's things to look at. Um, One of the things that I was just looking at some aerial shots of really clear ones that I'm going to use in my next set of articles. And literally, you see the tents and you see the area and you see the ruins, and some areas are just absolutely flattened. And what I'm noticing is when I can get a rare, because they killed all the journalists, all the Palestinian journalists, just about all of them were killed by they were hunted down actually. And so too, because they didn't want them filming all this, because in the first year of it, you saw everything. It was terrible what was going on. Now you don't see it anymore because all the people who were doing that were systematically killed. And so the other thing is that so then what I see is I don't see in the crowds little children that I used to see before this happened. In the streets of Gaza in 2023 before October. I don't see a lot of children. I see a lot of malnourished young people. Makes sense. I don't see any granddads and grandmothers. I mean, there was a population study of all this that in did a paper that was they finished the paper in April of 2025, and then it was published in July of 2025. And it kind of shocked the world because they came out with I think the first realistic number. They said, given the calculations that have happened when cities and places have been destroyed like this, said that the real number is probably 680,000 dead, mostly women and children and minors. And the vast majority, when I see people coming to get food, most of them are young men. I don't see any women with them. I used to see the women coming. Where are they now? Are they too weak to go or what? I mean, or they died. So you know, Zionist Israel has a nasty thing it wants to keep a lid on because if people could really go in and see what's going on there, well, it would well, what can I say? It's another Auschwitz moment, and by the people who were victims of Auschwitz. Anyway, so the thing that is an engine of prophecy is not intelligence, it's predictability. And what I've found is predictability is a very strong force in prophecy, which is basically unconscious. Unconscious people repeat mistakes. They don't learn from their mistakes. Unconscious people keep, whether they talk otherwise, their actions betray the fact that no matter how much we talk about how we should have um, maybe not have so many people and maybe be more balanced with the way we use the earth. That little bark beetle comes chirping in us saying, "Oh no, it's okay. We got more land and resources. Look at all those trees, you bark beetles. How can we eat them all?" You know? Unfortunately, there's a bark beetle in this. And another thing that I studied firsthand as a pest as the ranch Oregon Commune, OSHA Oregon Commune pest controller. I was this one guy that did the whole 64,000 acres. And I see, it's a very simple thing. If you look at the rodent populations of the ranch in, Oregon high deserts, this means very hot, this continental desert kind of stuff. You have very hot summers and very cold winters with lots of snow and ice and stuff. So it's a harsh place for any mammal rodent to deal with. And of course, what the mammal rodents do that is so good for their survival is they're very fertile and they produce lots of babies. But here's the thing that gets in trouble with them. Those mammals that lived in the harsh times, when we came and built our buildings there and put our mobile homes on their parched land, suddenly these little mice were thinking, "Ooh, we've got shelter. We can go on the inside these, eat our way inside the basement areas of these little places, and maybe we can chew a few holes and get into their kitchen. Oh, they've got honey and they've got this and that stuff we'd never dreamed of eating." And so I know because I saw the holes, I had to plug them up in the different houses. And so they go down back. And suddenly, because there was so much more food, this isn't a rodent's world. It's like we've created America. We got all these goods and stuff. And so what do? We consume, making more babies. And what then happens is we're not as hardy as our grandparents rodents were when there were no houses and all this affluence and stuff. Get a little soft, get a little stupid, get a little distracted about the dangers of life. And then what happens is you start coming down with the animal version of the bubonic plague, a plague that still kills at least 3,000 people across the world every year. And what had been happening when I became the pest controller, and Manon Sheila was getting, who was kind of ran the place, the day-to-day activities of it. She was starting to see where there were farmers around us and ranches that were coming down with the bubonic plague, some of them dying. And of course, we had scientists and a lot of educated people in our commune, and they got around that said, yeah, when uh, that means if we're putting 20,000 people uh, every summer in camps in this region which is prone to animal bubonic rodent plagues, uh, that means some of our people coming from around the world might catch it. And of course, because of the controversial nature of Oz, it would just be another thing used to shut us down. So that argument was given to Sheila. I think I had a little part in it, and then I ended up becoming with for the first year with Ravi Dasa, who was he was a scientist, and so he kind of trained me. And so when we were on the radio, on the walkie-talkies, because we all talked around the 64,000 acre place, and we had even some in Bend, Oregon. There were a lot of bars that would have our frequency, so they could just listen to us because we were really funny. For instance, Ravidasa used the handle a brain, and I was weapon. God's the one that did all the killing and the eradicating. So he go, brain, brain to weapon. And I go, weapon. We got some rats and over up here, and the girls are on the chairs, and they're not coming down. I think I gotta go over there. I'll handle it. So it's kind of funny because Osho has a great sense of humor. I was called Dion John for the first few years of my life as a disciple of Osho, and then I felt one day it just felt like, okay, I've made peace with John. Now I'd like a completely new name, and I always felt like he had a really interesting name for me, but he held it back. Within 2 days, I got the paper from him, and he had written out I was now Swami Dhyan Arjuna, so I'm Arjuna. And if any of you read Hindu scriptures or the Mahabharata and all, I was this king in the Great Indian War. Bharat was what India was called in ancient times. There's actually been moves to drop the idea of India and call it Bharat. Um, Anyway, so this great Mahabharata, the great Bharata war, um, and there was this big battle, and Arjuna had the majority of the people were on the other side, and they were all the people that were his teachers, his archer teacher, and all. And they wanted the crown. He didn't even want the crown. Of course, that's why he got the crown because, like Aragorn, he didn't really want to be a king. He had no ambition. That can be sometimes your best kings. So he's got Lord Krishna, the avatar of the time, is his chariot driver. He's also king of Vrindavan. And what had happened is when he came to ask him to join his side, the head of the other army was there at his feet. And when Krishna woke up, he saw the guy at his feet from his afternoon nap, and he says, "I want your army." Can no, he said, "I want you to fight on my side." So Krishna saw him, and then he looked over at Arjuna, being who didn't wake him up and just was waiting. And he said to the enemy king, he said, "You can have my entire army. It's one of the best armies in India. But all I want, but Arjuna, he gets me." And Arjuna was overjoyed. That's all he wanted because he was a disciple. I just want you. I don't care about the army. I want you to be fighting with me. And he ended up being his chariot driver. And of course, what happened is he saw all the people lining out there on the fields, and they were all his role models. And he was had now to kill all his role models for this crown he didn't really want. So he freaked and he got off the chariot and started crying and sitting up against the wheel. And Krishna came down. And what then happened is one of the small chapters of the Mahabharata that is now one of the most important Hindu scriptures in Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna kind of spells out the whole reason of destiny and how you were, it's divine will that you were created as a soldier rather than a Shudra or Kshatriya or one of the other castes. And it's God's will that you're a great warrior and you must fulfill God's will and kill all these people. Just anyway, um, I could go on about where I disagree about that, but it's just to be fair to Hebrews and everybody else and Christians. Yes, go ahead.
We, we
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm really in a river flow tangent today.
we have someone that typed in a question. So tomorrow is D day, quote D Day for the sanctions with Iran. So this person is asking, what do you think comes out of that sanction for D Day? Major
So
escalation.
first, I got to clarify it now. So the 60 days has already passed.
Yes.
So I'm assuming, and maybe he can type it in if I'm wrong. I'm assuming what he's talking about is a more recent Trumpian threat.
Yeah.
Is
This is
this
the
economic? He's going to give the mother of all economic. Yeah,
that
I'm
starts
thinking
Monday.
he's meaning that, or he or her.
Yeah. No, that's what he means is the additional sanctions that are going to take place.
Well, well, isn't it interesting? Sounds like a bit of a taco pattern, uh, Trump tacoing, because today is Sunday night here in the
Right.
Pacific Northwest. Tomorrow is the opening day of the stock market.
Right.
So if that's the deadline, uh, Trump might go taco again. Trump always chickens out. That's what the uh, what taco is about. So
Well,
he'll
what is
he'll
in
talk about some, oh, I did something wonderful. Now we're talking, which not, and then just and make a few $100 million for his family completely illegally, and nobody's. This is
before
another thing about our completely lawless government right now.
before our show? I looked at the energy market,
Mm.
the oil futures market, and it was trading down. All right, and so it was trading at around 85, $84 a barrel. It was trading intraday on Friday at around 87, $88 a barrel. So if D Day, all right, tomorrow with these,
Donald Day.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know what's amazing with Trump, and this is going on a tangent here. You know, what's amazing with Trump is that in a negative way, it's all about like some sort of commercialization
Yeah.
spin. It's, you know, it's not really about substance. It's all
Yeah.
about marketing. So this
So,
deviant,
and it's all about him coming, coming on top any which way he can.
right? Okay, so the point I'm making is before our show today, the market for barrels of oil, the cost for barrels of oil have been going down. The futures market's going down. You would think that with additional sanctions, secondary sanctions, that Besant is saying is going to happen, that there would have been a tick up with oil because there's more instability. So just to finish the question that this individual asked is what do you think comes out of that? Major escalation against China, Xi canceling his trip to the United States,
Could happen.
or Iran's response like charging fees in the Strait. You would think that there would be an escalation, you know.
Well, first off, this is futures. This is kind of a prophecy chart thing. It's not actually, it's like it's called futures because it's hoping that if they if they predict something lower that somehow people are going to do that. But it's not, the actual when the barrel is out of the ship or worse, there's no ship and no barrel, and you've been losing your reserves. There's going to come a point where this fantasy land of speculation is going to hit reality. And I think I'm even surprised how long these people have kicked the can, because it's the last chance to kick the can of reality down the path, which this whole modern speculative economy has been very good at doing, and they just can't let it go. It's habit. It's well, we'll just keep it in the future rather than the reality now. But the reality, they can keep trying this. But I think the perfect storm that all of this is setting up, they might even be able to BS this all the way to the midterm elections. But there is coming at some point, reality is going to have to be faced. And there's a number of ways it could happen. I mean, for instance, there's Japan, which really wants to sell off its bonds, its U.S. Treasury bonds,
Mhm.
to get some cash because they've been out of gas and oil and stuff early. You look at Japan, you're looking at our future in a few months. They started feeling the pain pretty much after it began. But now they're at the point where they may very well just start selling off their bonds and making the profits from them from people who want to have them cheap. And when that happens, we're beginning what I've always said for years now is how the US hegemon very rapidly collapses as an empire, a global unipolar empire. It will collapse because it's this really, I mean, it started back in 2003. I was saying again, when Bin Laden, um, MBS, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, uh, when the first time, I think, end of 2003, he started to say, I'm going, and this is the first time Saudi Arabia ever broke from its agreement to use the US dollar as a crude currency to kind of, the gold standard had been dropped in 1971, but a new standard was kind of unofficially replacing it, and that was Nixon saying, okay, to the Fouad, I think was the king then, says, we'll do this but we'll do this as you guys as the gold standard, not gold, but you can only buy and sell through US bonds and US cash. This They created the petrodollar, and the petrodollar was the foundation of the global currency reserve of the United States in a world. And frankly, thought this was only going to be temporary. In fact, all the people that decided this was going to be, I don't think if he was alive, he could imagine that this temporary fix that didn't go back to the gold standard in some other way has taken all this time. This is where all the economies speculated on oil as the basis of a reserve currency. But then Ben Salman, he for the first time in October of 2023, I believe, he openly said, we're going to also exchange with Chinese yuan. So he broke the agreement. This is when he was still interested in trying to be a member of the BRICS. And in fact, they are technically a member of the BRICS, but he's been sitting on the fence with the United States. And I know why, because the Saudis have vast amounts of investment that we don't even know about, like $500 million in the mainstream news medias. They've invested very big in a lot of their money in the United States assets. So he's trying to sit on the fence and still stay with the US dollar, but kind of get a little of the action into what is the future. I mean, China this year declared, it's a big bit of news that most mainstream news ignored, but Xi Jinping, the president of China and the general secretary head of the Chinese Communist Party, said, we are now going to become like the United States, not just an industrial number one economy, but also the world's number one financial economy, doing financial power. So their next step is to hopefully govern wiser than we. And that means in between the lines is the yuan or renminbi is going to be the next global currency. And majority of the global world, which we hardly hear about, which this whole war in Ukraine and Western Asia is all about, at least the childish Trump has openly, innocently admitted it once or twice, that he's gone to war with the BRICS. This whole concept of a Eurasian, Southern Hemispheric new world order of sovereign nations that is not dominated by 500 years of Western colonial powers, which America has become the last great hegemon of. This he has enough understanding to understand that the Achilles heel of the great atlas holding up the world, which is the United States, is the US dollar being turned away from by a world that has other options that it didn't have once the US dollar was number one. And so he knows that's the Achilles heel, but he is stupid, completely stupid about how he is and America has created this karma and now it's coming home to roost. I mean, the first thing I would advise Trump to do, if you ever listen to me, would be, well, it's very simple. You have one of your magnificent brain farts, type it in, and the brain fart that you will have might have some effect. You unilaterally erase every sanction the United States has put on everybody through economic US dollar pressure. You clean the dollar of all of that and say, okay, we're done with that nightmare. Now you can use US dollars any which way you want, but you use them, not yuan. And that you buy the bonds and you're not going to get punished for it. You're not going to get all these sanctions. Two-thirds of the world is under US sanctions because we weaponized the US dollar, which makes it toxic. The beetle can't eat this tree. He's going to go and eat off another tree, that welcomes him to eat the wood. And so basically the United States cut their own throats economically with this. And now it's coming home to roost. And it's just taking a long time because what is a finance, we dropped Glass-Steagall. Thank you, Bill Idiot Clinton. What an idiot. Slick Willie brought down Glass-Steagall, which Roosevelt had established during the Great Depression, because what happened in the Roaring 20s, 1920s, is that speculation, this whole idea of a casino economy, was made where people could just speculate and make money on nothing. And what it did is they took a lot of the wealth and interest away from the real economy that makes things for people, that what people need and what people want. And then, so it was the first experiment with this disastrous situation that we're now in today, where so when Roosevelt, I think in 1932 or 33, in his first term, he basically put a wall between the real banks and the speculation in the stock market. And what that did is create the greatest economic boom and profit making and growth of economics in the human history. This huge growth thing that lasted all the way up until the late 90s, when Bill Clinton dropped the firewall between the two and made speculative economy equal to real money economy. And it all started going down from there. And now, it's I've been writing about, there was the Great Depression. I've been writing about how 2008 was incorrectly called the Great Recession, and how we've been in it ever since on a drip. We're hooked into the blood pumping into our system, which is called well, basically our economy has been on a hospital bed since 2008. And what we've been pumping into it is with just printing more money, which is just like putting something into the economy's IV in its wrist. And if we stop putting that in, then this moribund economy is going to die, like pulling the plug on it. We've been in a mess since 2008, and I renamed the Great Recession because that's what they called the Great Depression in the 30s. They didn't call it the Great Depression until it was over. In the 1940s, they called it, mid 40s, they were calling it the Great Depression, but up till 42, they called it the Great Recession. It was never called the Great Depression throughout Roosevelt's life, during the Depression. So, so I call then 2008 the Greater Depression, that was very cleverly hospitalized and pumped with lots of money, that because we can just make it, because we are the reserve currency, we can make as much money as we want, all the way to inflating ourselves to $40 trillion public and $120 trillion private debt, which is an astronomical number that can only be erased in a grand jubilee. There's no way we're going to pay this off. So sooner or later, I mean, if a dumb bark beetle like me can understand this much about economy, it's like you can't fix this. It's astronaut. It's too much. You're just going to have to declare Jubilee and start all over again. So, so now, but I've also been predicting that this Greater Depression was going to be slammed by the Greatest Depression. And it gives me even more chills to understand, because there's one person I very much respect over the years, so much so that I try not to watch him until I've made my own conclusions through my own ways, because it's uncanny how much with completely different disciplines that we end up saying literally the same thing. And that is Gerald Celente of the Trends. He's truly we constantly come to the same conclusions. So I don't want to be influenced by him until I've made my own decision. Then I check him out on something. And he even calls this the greatest depression coming. And it's coming now. And trend the Trends Journal says that, listen up, because he's very accurate.
And it coincides with, the 2 years, the double tap, as you phrased it, with the Rosh Hashanah and
Yeah, it is
and the
the
Sabbath.
most dangerous one of them all, this
Yeah,
next 2 years. And it's just a few days away. September 11th,
right.
it's going to start. And it's going to be going all the way through 2028 when the shofars in September or October, I can't remember which, in the Rosh Hashanah, New Year of Judaism, can blow again.
And we have a lot of debt in the country. We're at 122%
Yeah.
debt to GDP ratio. There's problems in the bond market. People are afraid of AI taking jobs away.
Yeah. They're
There's
right to be.
there's instability with the Trump administration.
Yeah.
War, around the world happening. Potentiality of China moving into the first island chains more aggressively within the next 12 months,
Yeah.
maybe 24 months. So a lot of these things are happening, plus the derivatives market, going back to what you were saying about the firewall being taken down during the Clinton administration. There was a point in time during the around 1995 when our debt to GDP ratio was around 60, I want to say about 61, maybe 64. And it came down to about 55,
Yeah.
about near the end of his administration, Clinton's
Yeah.
administration. And then it started ticking up.
Yeah, because he let Glass-Steagall
It
go.
just kept that, and that debt to GDP ratio just kept on going up and up and up and up and up. And then there was 9/11, and then there was the Lehman, and then there was COVID, and it's just up and
And
up.
this long line of Neptune's sun squared presidents.
Right. So,
With Biden, who didn't have that, but he had such an afflicted Jupiter in his 12th house Scorpio going on that it was like he was getting slammed in a completely different negative way. And then
so,
we've had two mentally ill presidents in a row.
so we have a derivatives market that is in the trillions of dollars, maybe hundreds, and no one really knows how big how
And
big.
that's the dynamite, the derivatives.
Right.
That's
So
the
when this thing
dynamite.
starts to collapse,
Yeah.
it's like an accelerant. It's not just layoffs. It's not just, GDP going down negative. There's an accelerant because of all of these derivatives that have been building up since the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
And talking about weapons of mass destruction, we metaphorically nuke our own economy because of it.
Yeah.
There'll be like this almost like self detonation that takes place.
Yeah, so we just filled our economy, speculative economy, with amount of fake money. Each dollar of it is like a nuclear bomb, and of fakeness. And we've got these astronomical numbers that nobody in their mind can relieve the debt. I've heard some really fanciful ideas, like Trump was going to put it in his one of his coins and put the whole U.S. debt into a thing and take all its value away, because that's the other thing that could happen. We're going to almost a little over a century ago, Germany, I think we're going to face something Germany faced, where, oh, I'm going to go out and get myself a piece of bread. Okay, well, do you have 500 million Deutschmarks? Yeah, I've got it in the tractor here. I'm just going to haul it down from the farm to the shop and buy a loaf of bread, because literally it was this. You had to have mountains of cash just to have a cup of coffee. It fortunately didn't last long because it's ridiculous. You can't. This is where it just gets. You know, Capitalis is the word that is the basis for capitalism. And what it means is it's all in our heads. It's this very Aquarian age idea where just like Bitcoin becomes valuable, it's just a Bitcoin is just a very complex mathematical number that takes overheating a bunch of systems, computers to make. It has a limit, but it has this quality. If we all agree to it, if we all think there's a value to it, that literally makes it a mathematical gold reserve. We haven't been able yet to make it easy to be converted into a real currency, but as a Fort Knox in cyberspace, it's a very interesting and very Aquarian age concept because it's just an idea and it's not actually tangible. It's not like gold in Fort Knox or God knows where else they hid it. It's but it has it if people agree to it with all their heads together, it has power. It is a kind of way to uh, all we've done is it's all about when enough people believe something has value because of its rarity. This is a mathematical rarity. Gold is valuable because there's not a lot of gold on the planet. It's very beautiful. It has aesthetics. Silver less so, but still we all agree through the aesthetic of this metal and its preciousness that, well, I mean, even I have a half-ounce Krugerrand in my bank, so, and it's a very pretty coin from 1981, and it's in my bank in a vault somewhere. But we think it's so, then we have made it so. So the only thing I can say is the way out of this is we've got to have enough people around the world think something else up that we can all think as a value. And I literally think the only way this works is because you cannot fix this problem. So what we need to do, you can't fix this problem. The bark beetle has eaten the forest economy, and the trees are dying because there's no value in them. So they're like these trees are alive. These financial trees are alive because of the value we have in them. Well, they're no longer valuable. You can't have 120 trillion plus 40 trillion is $160 trillion. There is no way that will pay this off. We've gone we've gone past paying this off for decades. So there's only one thing to do. Some lightning strike of an idea that sets this debt forest on fire, and we start all over. We have an ultimate jubilee with the system. And so I'm still wrestling with this concept, but anybody out there has better ideas, I'm all ears. But we can't fix this. It can only be set on fire, and we grow something new for our little bark beetles to consume.
That would mean home values would go down. That would mean assets that someone has accumulated, especially in the financial markets, would go down.
Yeah.
It
Well,
would,
that's the gamble,
you know,
and now it's all
that would
spot.
probably be deflationary. Based on definition, be deflationary. I
Well, this is the thing. If it goes into, this is one good thing that could happen. It's not a nice way to do it, but it's like sometimes if you got to cut off an arm that's got gangrene, it's a good thing to do because you're going to die um, if you don't cut it off. What will happen is it will be inflation. But what happened to the Weimar Republic in Germany was it was about 2 years of this where it got so catastrophically bad that it deflated to where it was worthless money. And because then they were able to pay it off. Because I don't still understand. I'm not an economist, so I don't understand how that works. But apparently, the deflation made the will make that 160 trillion public and private debt uh, affordable to pay off because it's worthless. Here's a buck. I paid it off,
What
and
I
start
see,
all over again.
where the problem, where I see the problem is that the Federal Reserve is printing too much money. All right, and
Well, that's the IV that's kept this thing
right, right,
alive
right.
since the
So the
so-called
Federal
Great
Reserve,
Recession.
this Federal Reserve has these targets. Unemployment rate needs to be low, and the inflation needs to be at 2%. But we're getting to a point because of artificial intelligence and just a digital economy where if the Federal Reserve could track all transactions, all right, so we have a digital dollar and all transactions are tracked real time, then they will have an algorithm or can have an algorithm that can justify what the monetary base needs to be digitally for at any given moment. So there would be never inflation.
Ah, that's the big trick of that. Yeah, it'll all be good. Like uh when everybody's financial transactions are absolutely watched by a totalitarian AI regime,
Right, right. Well, now,
then
now you have the
then we will
privatization.
have the glorious new world. Excuse me.
But the thing is that
Dr. Strangelove.
no, you're right about this. The thing is that to take away the human element out of the Federal Reserve because it can be manipulated. If there could be an algorithm that is used that can automatically adjust what the monetary base is at any given moment in time, you would never have inflation.
Well,
Because
there's
the moment when the data is showing that there's inflation, then that means that someone's manipulating the algorithm.
yeah.
It's there's a
Yeah,
self-correcting.
well, like even the president is brazenly doing it. Yeah, and that's a crime. He actually should go to jail and be kicked out of. He has committed his wealth of his family business has exponentially gotten larger since he's been, especially in his second term. I thought the former Speaker of the House was bad. She was really brazen with it, but he's over the top, and everybody's just going, "Oh, okay." There should be federal people coming in and arresting his butt and taking him out, or there should be people, but they're all doing it. I mean, this is also the Congress that the best APAC money could buy. Um, it's not just Donald, it's all lawless. It's become a very lawless thing. And what my concern is that uh, we're going to then surrender. The problem has been human unconsciousness and human greed. But we're now going to give it to a machine that's inhuman. I don't think that's going to work. But then I guess we're going to have to go through a digital fascism. And hopefully it doesn't end up with this being the Forbin Project, a most prophetic movie from the mid 60s, where they created a supercomputer and it became intelligent and it was wired into everything. And things were getting better but then finally the computer decided in its own soulless logic that we couldn't take care of ourselves. So he kind of started controlling as the ultimate dictator, and they tried to get into him and stop it, but he even created a defense system that lasered persons to atoms, and so they couldn't pull the plug. And I guess I'm going to have to start writing about the Forbin project, because I've said on the show and for decades I've said that the trinity of things that could end the human race, the least dangerous of them is a thermonuclear war. We can survive that. The second most dangerous is global warming. We can adapt to that, but it'll be thousands of years of adapting to it. But AI, the golem of artificial intelligence made of mud, not a man, not a rabbi, even though it's made by a rabbi, Lub, and I love the story of the golem. Um, and now this thing is made of mud has been given magical powers to protect people. And he ends up being a monster, He ends up taking control of everything and saying, no, no, you created me, but I'm a superior being, and my creator is full of faults, and therefore I will run everything. And uh, I don't think the human race can survive that. That's the most dangerous thing, because the human race is literally first off, the human race, 99.9% of the human race is not even conscious. They think they're conscious, they dream that they're conscious. They have this whole dream of being awake and being a person and this world being real and all of that. And but the truth is this, and this is where the world of radical conscious seeking is a thread in every religion as well. In Judaism, Baal Shem Tov would understand what I'm talking about, and Buddha would understand what I'm talking about, and the Sufi masters would understand what I'm talking about. It's what my master was all about. Um, the fundamental problem is that the human race has not yet created a civilization that brings every new child in as a Buddha, as a gift of Christ consciousness, or some whatever you want to call it, or source, a person that's come from the source through us, our beloved children. But we are too unconscious of what happened to us when we came through, and we're going to unconsciously do to our children exactly what happened to us, as all the way back to the beginning. And that is, we we want our children to get along in this world of dialectics and ego and competition and all of that, and we make them forget the thread of the divine source that they brought into the world. And without that intelligence, this is true intelligence. Innocence, it starts as something innocent. Rather than shut that down and put a mask, a persona, a personality in its place, is the fundamental cause of what could be our ultimate extinction. Because um, we are not even aware of this gift that we have, all of us being born are bringing. We're bringing the source. We're bringing godliness into the world. The creator itself is what is this spark inside of us. And we can train in this visit. Also, the thing is, fundamentally, this reality is never born and never dies. It's only visiting in these forms. This mystery in me, in you, and all of you listening and watching is the same mystery, the same eternal now. It is the source of love. It's the source of intelligence. It's the source of compassion. But everybody gets coated with an ego and are trained to forget this greatest gift that every living being that has been born has come into the world with. And we keep suppressing it with ego, with this illusion that we're separate from entities, we have a will, and our separate will can change things. And now, if you drop the will, your spontaneity, your spontaneous intelligence will create things. Um, and this is really the fundamental formula problem, that we are um, trying to bring God's light incarnated in the world. The Christians kind of get caught up with the idea of Christ being this. Frankly, someday, maybe, the great ages that Giacchino di Fiore talked about in the 12th century is a He was a contemporary of Saint Malachi who did the papal prophecies. He was a Calabrian monk. He created this whole concept of the history of the good news on the earth being three 20th century long eras. The first was the era of the Father. He based it on the Holy Trinity. The era of the Father was the first major step, followed by the year of the Son, Father being God, the Son of God, being according to Christianity, a living temple rather than a stone temple where Yahweh would come to visit his creation in the Holy of Holies. That was destroyed, and then the Son's ministry happened before that happened, but it really took off after 2070 AD, and started to spread all over the world as is part of the diaspora. Many Christian Jews as well were involved. And so then 20 centuries go, and now that era is coming to an end in a few years. 2033 will be the 2000-year anniversary of the Passion of Christ, his death and resurrection. And there's a transitional period where the age of the Son will disappear now and be replaced by 2070 with the beginning of the age of the Holy Spirit. And hopefully in the next 20 centuries, what we'll see is an end to this breaking of the thread of eternity that every child brings into the world, that we will start to see religiousness not be suppressed. We'll start to recognize what children are bringing in. They're bringing godliness into the world. So don't let us make them into egos like us. Let us train them how to be here, because this is an eternal life thing. It's ever now, and being put into a world that is run by identity and illusions of separateness and dialectics that makes this illusion that I am a separate, willful person pushing against the will of other people, and that I am separate from this existence. You are this existence. All this stuff doesn't happen unless each of us who have the spark of it, which is the source, has created it. So it changes the whole way of looking at it. From the Father to the Son to the age of the Holy Spirit, which is going to begin in most of our lifetimes, even mine. It will begin, well, no, I'm probably not going to be here in 2070, but I'm already 70 now. But it's going to happen for a lot of you who are young. This era will begin, and it has to rethink the whole thing, and it has to break the thread of programming people to be egos. Otherwise, this human race doesn't have a chance. And maybe that fits with another set of prophecies that of the Native Americans, of the Hopi, who talk about there have been four worlds. We are in the fourth world that's been created, according to Hopi prophecy. Each world ended with a catastrophe. The last world ended, the third world ended with a great flood, Noah's Ark. The next, we are now with the 2020s, we are in that transitional period of the great, the Hopi call it the great purification. And it's purified, the world is going to be purified by fire. Maybe that's also, we had a flood back then in the fourth world. The fifth world is going to be created by global warming. Fire, hot house Earth. So what happens is a very few survive these catastrophes, and then they are always the seed of another chance for the human race. I mean, this is a different variation, Paul, of when you talk about other chances. This is, and it's a theme that's in many religious sacred movements and stuff when they look into the future. And it could very well be that these are the final days of the fourth world, which will see most of it and us destroyed, but then there'll be a new group of people that will survive it, that will be the seed of a more spiritually balanced and earth healing and maybe a whole different value system than we've got lost into because of this illusion of being separate from the whole. You see, I'm a wave. Paul, you're a wave. All these inanimate objects are waves. And some of us also have a visiting source that is not of mind and time, which is of eternity itself, which is only in the present. All these things that move and change, including our graying beards and everything like that, are part of this dream of separateness that is a is a thing under the illusion of movement and time. But this thing I'm talking about that's in all of us, it is not of time. So it has never been born. It's free of that. It's never going to die because it's free of that. In fact, it's even free of existing because to exist is a trap of time. To exist means that you have to then become non-existing. This is even free of those two things. And this is a thing that we must somehow find a way not to stifle in every new child's birth so that it can teach us. This innocence can teach us how to really live and how to really create and enjoy this dream. It doesn't have to be a nightmare. Why not make this a very beautiful dream? It's still a dream. But if you have a choice of dreams, why create nightmares? Why not to create a very beautiful dream that we can play with? And still, this consciousness is not a part of it because it does not move in time. It's just like having a beautiful dream. Why not enjoy it and be creative in it and all of that? Right now, we're creating a nightmare, the ultimate nightmare in so many ways.
Well, we've gotten to that point, John, that we're going to have to close it down here. But before we do, I want to remind the audience in the description of this video, there's a link to John's website and also to his X page. So please click that link and you can sign up for a periodical and a reading. So John, if you can briefly talk about those two. And
Yes, I do. I the I do reading one-on-one with you, and it usually goes for about 2.5 hours. It goes deep, but it's also a beautiful journey. So, and it also is important. We of the alternative media, we don't have big money. We don't have big money behind us. We who are in the free media uh, need your help. I need your help. If if all of you could just consider some financial help to us, this can go on. Otherwise, if you this voice that you're hearing, this person you're seeing may vanish. So, whatever you can do, one of the things that you can do is share this show with everybody you know. Get more and more people to see what Paul is doing. And that's how you can do it. So there are some things you can do. You can like, that will help. But the main thing is think of a whole list of people. If you love this show and you dedicated to watching this, make a list of emails of all the people that you love or friends or people you want to share this with and share that link. Or one way to do it is the way I get here is I go on YouTube and I type in Paul Cottrell, John Hogue, and that prompts all the shows that I do up in whatever different Warsaw or the other names that we use to keep freedom from the algorithms so that we can say the things we can say on YouTube without being censored. So this would be a great thing. If you can't afford it, I understand, but you can help us by think of hundreds of people that you want that you know that you might think might be interested in this show, and send them a link of this show and send them with a letter. Say, I want you to know about these little interesting talks that Mr. Hogue has with Paul and all the rest of you. And that will help increase and then tell those friends, if you like what you see, send to your friends um, a copy, just cut and paste and send them to all your friends. So, and then ask them to do the same and then to do the same. And then what you're doing without having to spend any more than just a little time, you are getting a whole lot more people interested in us, which could help us uh, also financially keep this going. So you can do this. You can do this. And I trust you will.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up, but just everybody click that link that's in the description to John's website so you can sign up for his periodical and do the readings.
Yeah.
So, John, say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye to everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the chat. And we're going to be doing this in another 2 weeks.
Yes.
Everybody, good night.
Good night.